What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Erdell, and in today's video we're going to be covering a very strong system against the move e5 with the Vienna game, in which white plays knight c3, indirectly fighting for the center of the board, specifically the light squares on d5 and e4. We're also planning on playing g3 and bishop g2, further maintaining our hold on e4 and d5, and on top of that create and build a Grand Prix attack-like system against the opponent's king. Now, first off, shout out to my guys for recommending that I make this opening. I'm a huge fan of the Vienna game opening system, and honestly, I'm not sure why it took me this long to get around to it, but I'm excited for y'all to see it, and I hope that it will serve you well in your games. Now here, against the move knight c3 with the Vienna game, usually black will play a move like knight to f6, in which case we're simply going to play g3, further unfolding our idea of just playing bishop to g2, and here black really has two main options. The first one is to play bishop c5, activating the bishop and attacking the somewhat vulnerable pawn on f2, and the second is to immediately break with d5. Now with bishop g2 on the way, keep in mind when bishop g2 is played, d5 has stronger reinforcement for white. So if black wants to get d5 in this game, black should probably do it right about now. But let's first go over the move bishop c5, activating the bishop and attacking our f2 pawn. Well, here, we're just going to continue with bishop g2, and let's say a move like d6 is played, knight g e2. Now, I personally didn't play this move for years because I was worried about knight g4, and it appears as if black has some attacking chances. The knight and the bishop are both attacking our somewhat vulnerable pawn on f2, but it turns out that white is completely fine. Here, we're simply going to castle queenside, and yes, black could take our pawn on f2, and 3 plus 3 equals 1 plus 5. That is the common number that you give for material in chess. So yes, if black does take on f2, we would be sitting at even material, but most chess masters agree that two minor pieces, are of much more value than a pawn and a rook. So here we would be very happy if black decided on move 6 to give us 2 of their 4 minor pieces for only a rook and a pawn. But the move I was concerned about was queen f6, and now there's 3 pieces. The bishop, knight, and queen all attacking that f2 pawn, and it appears as if white has to play a move like queen e1, but here white can actually play d4. What on earth is white doing? Well, now black has 2 choices, taking with the pawn or taking with the bishop. If e takes d4, we now have this knight to d5 idea. And really what we're doing here is attacking both the queen on f6 and the pawn on c7, in which we would take on c7, forking the king and the rook. So here, black can't let either of these happen. So it's by far the best move for black to play queen d8, escaping with the queen and defending that c7 pawn. But now the queen has lost sight of the pawn on d4, which we just lost. So we could take it right back with the knight. But let's first play b4, kicking the bishop back to b6, and then taking the pawn on d4. Now we're sitting at even material, and following a move like castling kingside, now play knight f5. I mean, talk about active knights, guys. The knight on d5 and the knight on f5 are very hard to deal with, and now we're attacking the knight on g4. So black's best option is probably to play something like bishop takes f5, but now we simply take on f5 with the pawn, and now our bishop on g2 becomes alive. We're also attacking, again, the knight on g4, and following a move like knight f6, we can continue with bishop g5, pinning the knight on f6, and after knight bd7, play knight takes f6 with check, take the pawn on b7, and here white has a clearly better game. What about the move bishop takes d4? Well, now we're going to take that bishop back, and following e takes d4, go back again to our same idea with knight d5, attacking the queen on f6, and attacking the pawn on c7. Here black really has no choice but to play queen d8, bringing the queen back to the square that it started on, and now we can centralize our queen, taking the pawn on d4, and look at our queens now. The queen on d4 is much more active than the queen on d8. In fact, right now we're actually threatening to play queen takes g7, and now it's a toss-up. A lot of computer programs seem to have a hard time deciding between castling kingside and f6, but if f6 is played, we can simply play f3, kicking the knight to e5, play f4, kicking the knight to f7. If knight g4, we simply play h3, kicking the knight to h6. So after knight f7, we can now continue with b3. And really the whole idea is to play bishop b2. Now, if we play bishop d2 or bishop e3, I mean, these aren't bad moves, and I would still much rather have white in this position. But now after castling and bishop b2, talk about power right now, attacking prowess. The bishop on b2 and the queen on d4 forming a battery ram, and it's honestly hard for black to develop in this position. In fact, black can lose this game extremely quickly if not careful. I mean, let's say black plays a move like bishop e6, looking to somehow unravel this position forward. Keep in mind, black is way behind in development, not to mention a very awkward knight on f7 that can really only go to h8 or h6. We have a space advantage, an advantage in development, and now we can simply play rook fe1. We want to centralize our rooks, start pushing pawns down the board, create space, and win this game. But here, let's say black plays queen d7, just naturally developing the queen. The queen can't come to e7 because of our very strong knight on d5. But if queen d7 is played, we have a very nice idea with queen takes f6. We're first off threatening mate in 1 now because of queen takes g7, and this also shows just how powerful the bishop on b2 is. Following g takes f6, we can now take the pawn on f6 with check, attacking the king and the queen on d7, and after king g7, take the queen again with check. Now the king can't go to g6 or h6 because we'd simply pick off the rook. So after king g8, we now have knight f6 check again, attacking the king. And following king g7, we have again knight d5 check. I mean, this is just a nightmare for black. If king g8, we actually have knight e7, game over. So following a move like king h6, we could play knight takes c7, attacking both the rook on a8 and the bishop on e6, and here white is clearly winning this game. So that covers knight g4. I wanted y'all to be prepared for this move. Keep in mind, there's no need to panic. We're simply going to castle kingside, continue with d4 and knight d5 if queen f6 comes into play. Now, let's just say black doesn't play knight g4, which is actually a mistake, as tempting as it looks. And let's say black plays a move like knight c6, just naturally developing. Well, usually here, we'd play a move like d3, castle kingside, h3, king h2, continue with f4 and f5. But in this position in particular, against the bishop c5 line, knight a4 often becomes a very good option because this bishop is very active. A very strong bishop attacking our f2 pawn. It's very common in chess to put a bishop on c5 or c4 if you're white and attack the opponent's pawn. So why not pick this bishop off the board? Following bishop b6, we could snatch that bishop and now continue with our regular plan of d3, castle kingside, play a move like f4. There's really not much black can do from stopping white here. After h6, play h3, g4, f5. We're continuing to push, and we have very strong attacking chess ideas. We could play moves like queen e1 and queen h4, like a Grand Prix. We have g5 ideas, breaking things open, knight g3. And on top of that, it's very hard for black to break through with d5 because of our pawn on e4 attacking d5, as well as the bishop on g2 supporting it. I love this position for white. Now, we just went over the move bishop c5, and we're going to go over d5, and these are black's two strongest moves. But what if black just plays natural developmental chess and doesn't really fight for the center of the board here and just plays a move like bishop e7? I mean, this looks like a totally logical option. Well, now we're just going to continue with our regular plan of bishop g2, and if a move like d6, play knight ge2. If knight c6, fighting for the center of the board, we could castle kingside. And after castling kingside here, there's really two options for white. The first one is to continue with our regular idea of d3, h3, king h2, f4 with f takes e5 and f5 ideas. We can even play g4 and g5. We're going to aggressively go after the king on g8. But another idea, following lines like if a bishop is on e7 and not directly fighting for d4, is playing d4 here. One of the things I like about the Vienna game is that it offers white so much flexibility. We could play d3 and go for a kingside attack, or play d4 and fight for the center of the board and try to get an advantage in space. Here, if e takes d4, we simply take back with a knight. And if bishop g4, attacking our queen, there's no need to panic. We'll just play f3, and after bishop d7, play bishop e3, queen d2, bring the rooks into the center of the board. We have knight d5 ideas, f4 ideas, and I love white's game here. Now that we've covered bishop c5 and other moves like bishop e7, let's cover d5, immediately fighting for the center of the board. And really, I think this is the main move that white has to be prepared for. In fact, I recommend memorizing the following opening lines that I give you. Here, white is going to take on d5, and following knight takes d5, play bishop g2, offering some pressure on the knight on d5 with both the knight on c3 and the bishop on g2 attacking it. And here black really has two options, taking the knight on c3 or playing a move like bishop to e6. Let's first go over bishop e6 here. And now we're simply going to play knight f3. I know usually we play knight ge2, but in this specific line, I think that knight f3 performs a lot better, attacking the pawn on e5, and following knight c6, simply castling kingside. Now there's a couple things that black can do here. Black can play a simple move like bishop e7, naturally developing, or play knight takes c3, and following b takes c3, taking towards the center of the board, play e4, attacking our knight on f3. And it appears that after knight e1 and f5, here black has attacking chess plus space advantage in the center of the board with e4 and f5. But I actually think that white has the clearly better game here. First off, we need to remember to play knight e1. We don't want to play knight d4 and give up a pawn, or play knight h4 where it could get trapped with g5, but simply play knight e1. It may look passive, but following f5, we have d3, and we're planning on playing queen e2, followed by taking the pawn. And if you look at black's position, black barely has any development. We're castled, we have a strong bishop on g2, a castled king and rook, a knight on e1 that's ready to come into this game, a rook on a1 that can be very easily activated with rook to b1. But black, on the other hand, only has two minor pieces out, with the knight and the bishop, and on top of that, the pawns on e4 and f5 are a little bit overexposed. So what we want to do is play queen e2 and take the pawn on e4. And if e takes d3, there's really two options here for white. The first one, taking with the c pawn, and if you're more of a positional Karpovian type player, I recommend playing c takes d3. It offers white a strong strategic advantage and good pawn structure. Now, I personally am more of an attacking, aggressive player, so I like the move knight takes d3. Yes, this offers white double isolated pawns on c3 and c2, but I personally think that it's worth it for the attacking chances. Following queen d7, we can continue with queen to e2, attacking and pinning the bishop on e6, and following castling queenside, continue with knight f4, a very strong outpost for the knight, playing knight f4, attacking the bishop on e6, and here black has to run away with a move like bishop f7, in which we can now easily activate our rook with rook b1, attacking the pawn on b7, and following a6, preventing the queen from coming to a5, we can now play bishop e3. And I mean, look at the activity of white's pieces here. We have an extremely strong rook on b1, attacking b7, two strong bishops on e3 and g2, a very solid queen attacking the a6 pawn, and a very strong knight on f4 attacking so many squares. There's just not much black can do from stopping white's attacking chess, and I would give the clear edge to white. In fact, I would say that this is clearly winning. So we don't need to worry about a move like knight takes e3 and e4, because we're simply going to play knight e1, continue with d3, putting pressure on the very far exposed pawn chain, continue to develop our pieces, and play fun attacking chess. White has a clear advantage in that variation. But what if black just continues with bishop e7, naturally developing? Well, now we can play rook e1, attacking the pawn on e5, and following f6, it may be tempting for white to play some passive chess, like a move like d3, or b3, a3, h3, queen e2. There's so many moves here that aren't bad, but I personally think that d4 is a must here for white. In the Vienna game, guys, especially in the d5 variation, we have to break through in the center of the board, and we have to play aggressively. Here with d4, we're fighting for the center of the board and attacking the pawn on e5. It's very easy for black to mess up here, but the best move for black is to take our knight on c3, in which we'll play b takes c3, and following castling kingside, play queen e2, mounting pressure with our pawn on d4, knight, queen, and rook, all against that pawn on e5. And if e takes d4, we simply win a bishop. I would give the clear edge to white in this variation. So that covers bishop e6, in which we're not going to go with our usual knight ge2, but play knight f3, castle kingside, rook e1, break with d4, and enjoy an advantage in the opening. But what about knight takes c3 here? Well, against knight takes c3, we're again going to take towards the center of the board. You usually want to take towards the center of the board. That's the common chess strategy used. We don't want to take away, but take towards the center, fight for the center of the board. And on top of that, it's very easy to activate our rook with rook b1, attacking b7 whenever we play. B takes c3. And here, following a move like bishop d6, we're again going to continue with knight f3, and following knight c6, castle kingside, play rook b1, putting pressure on the b7 pawn. And if rook b8 here, d4. Again, we have to break the position open, guys. We can't play d3 or h3 or queen e1 or queen e2 or bishop b2. That's a lot of moves, but we need to break through with d4, fighting for the center of the board. And if bishop g4, I personally like queen d3, a very interesting move, a move that I usually wouldn't recommend at move 11, playing queen d3 in a position like this, because it appears as if black can soon play e4. And with rook e8, black is threatening to play e4, but now we have this knight g5 idea, a very nice idea, attacking h7 with the queen, and following g6, we can throw our bishop into enemy territory with bishop d5, and now both the knight and the bishop are attacking that weak f7 pawn. And following rook f8, queen c4, mounting the pressure. Now we don't only have a knight on g5 attacking f7, but a battery ram on d5 and c4 attacking that pawn. And following queen d7, we're now going to take on f7 with a knight. And some of you are probably thinking, wait, after rook takes f7, aren't we just giving up 2 pieces for a pawn and rook, which you just told us not to do? Well, we're not going to take the rook right away. In fact, we're going to play bishop takes c6. The idea here is that after b takes c6, we can simply take the rook on b8. And if the bishop isn't taken, we can bring the bishop right back, take the rook on f7, and we're going to be clearly winning this game. If you'd like to learn the theory behind the Italian game, another strong response to e5, click the video to the left. If you'd like to explore more chess openings in general, click the playlist to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.